So the capital improvement program is important in our land acquisition and our other projects that we currently have going on because it gives us the funds and the means to make those projects happen. In our 2024 land preservation plan, we identified over 12,000 acres for possible acquisition. And those acres can be recreation opportunities, conservation opportunities, but what we're really looking at is where those two items collide. So we would like the properties to have recreational benefits, but we really want them to be high quality conservation areas.
One of my first projects as I started working with the district was to actually establish an acquisition program. We started doing some additions to some of our existing properties. There had been a couple of properties that were known to us that we had willing sellers, and that was our very first efforts in the late 70s and early 80s. In the late 80s, 1989 was our first referendum, approved by the voters of Will County. We kind of knew it was going to be approved because we had done survey work. Leading up to the bond issuance, we actually went around to all of the different parts of the county and showed people what we were going to do as far as land acquisition or improvements. And I think that really helped us along the way. It answered a lot of questions. What was happening in the 70s was the first population burst in the county. When I first started working at the county, we were somewhere around 250,000 people. Around the beginning of the 80s, we were up to 375,000 people. And people could start to see what was happening all around them. Many of the people came from areas like DuPage or Cook County, where they had a forest preserve that was really active and they had facilities provided by the forest preserve. And so citizens actually started talking about it, wanting things to happen in the county before it was too late.
The success of the forest preserve in terms of the land acquisition program, it really is continuation of a policy and a commitment to completing the acquisition plans and the land preservation plans that were actually started in the late 1980s and early 1990s. So when I was first hired in 1986, I'm a biologist by training. I was the first natural resource manager. And one of my first projects, working in tandem with the other resource manager, we were given the task of identifying lands for land preservation by the Forest Preserve District. Two actually come to mind. Rock Run, which the headwaters are just east of Weber Road in Crest Hill. The other example I can think of is Black Walnut Creek, is on the east side of the county. And that was the headwaters property was finally protected under Ralph Schultz.
I joined the district in 1993, about 33 years ago, give or take. And when I did, it was a much different organization. Similar, obviously, in mission and purpose, but as an organization, as a district, we were quite a bit smaller. And over the years, but really one of my main focuses was always on connections and getting people out into the forest preserves. And I think that over time, what we attempted to do was try to create that community and that connection. You know, when we look at land preservation, and we had a system in place called a land evaluation system, it was weighted 50 points for habitat and conservation purposes and 50 points for recreation and connectivity. And so when we looked at properties, they would come up with an aggregate score. So when we were able to find sites that really met both of those were actually our highest priority sites.
So some of our recent acquisitions, like Goodnow Grove, obviously that's a huge acquisition at 495 acres. Very beneficial ecologically to our conservation department. But one of my favorite new acquisitions is at Riverview Farmstead with the 38 acres. And even though it's a smaller land acquisition, I like that project because it preserves space in an area where we don't have a lot of green space left.
How water flows through a property affects everything. Water is one of the requirements for life. So many of the resources, I mean, it's easy to look at plants, but what you can't see are the birds there? Are they breeding? Are the mammals? That's where hydrology is important. If you can protect how the water is moving through the site, you can protect the quality of it.
So I think some of the ones that you look at from a purely conservation standpoint, or not purely, but prioritized, are sites like our nature preserve sites, the Lake Renwick Heron Rookery, the Messenger Woods, the Braidwood Dunes in Savannah, Sand Ridge Savannah. Those sites are set aside because they're preserving something and they're providing habitat for species that may not have any other habitat in the county that they can exist in.
As far as land acquisition, my favorite project might be the Old Plank Road Trail. I started that project in 1976. And in the late 70s, I actually had cooperations from the Joliet Park District, the Forest Preserve District, New Lenox, and Frankfort Park Districts to actually start the project. And the board changed at the time, and we put away things for a while. And then we started back on it in the 80s, and then we opened up the grand opening was in 1996.
During my tenure, approximately just under 4,000 acres were added. But when I kind of really do go back to the first referendum, because I worked my entire career, I worked on the land acquisition program. It was always part of my job. When I was first hired in 1986, the Forest Preserve had a little over 5,000 acres, 5,200 acres, approximately. And by the time I retired, there was over 17,000 acres. One project you asked about, if I had a special project of all the things I worked on, and I would have to say it was Lockport Prairie Nature Preserve along the west side of the Des Plaines River, and that is it is a state nature preserve for a reason, because it's actually a globally imperiled habitat.
I'm very proud of what we've accomplished. So when I look at it, I don't look at success on my own. I always did so in community with others and by working with others to get that done. We have a wonderful team of staff here at the Forest Preserve District that does lion's share of the work. I was happy that I was able to advance our land acquisition and our capital improvement programs in 2019 and again in 2024 and ongoing.
Not just land acquisition, it's what we've done with the land that we've acquired. We've brought conservation ideas and conservation practices to the county that weren't here before. We've also done a great job of using some of our facilities to educate people. There's still more to do. I think people appreciate what we have currently done, and I think they'd like to see us do some more in the future.
I think the Forest Preserve has been unbelievably successful in protecting what matters. And it was done by a team of people who were committed. We wanted to create a plan that was sustainable, that was connected, and that allowed us to provide the recreation that we knew people wanted. We did surveys over the years, so we knew the kind of recreation that people wanted. So everything we did it started with those natural resources, but as we began protecting those lands, then we began saying, well, how can we fill in the gaps so that we can get these long distance trails between these properties?
We're creating conservation opportunities, education opportunities, and recreational opportunities, not just for today, but for future generations. And we're protecting the properties not from the people, but for the people.